on the News Channel 5 network. This is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Monday. I do indeed hope you had a very pleasant weekend back in the saddle. Did you notice something we haven't seen in a while? I mean, I guess we saw patches of it once in a while over the last 3-4 weeks when it was dry as a bone. It's raining this morning. Just sit back and relax, because I'll tell you, it's crazy on the roads. In fact, I'm just glad our guest made it here safely without hydroplaning with all the traffic this morning. It's nuts out there. But this morning, we're going to open up the phone lines for you. We're going to be talking about medical malpractice and... well, we've got an expert to handle all your calls with us this morning, Clint Kelly. Good morning to you. It's good to see you, malpractice attorney here. How was traffic driving in this morning? Not bad?
It was pretty wet.
I was hydroplaning coming in this morning, as early as I was, but it's not. Boy, we needed this rain.
We needed the rain, and unfortunately, when it does rain, and it's been a while, Nashville drivers tend to revert back to their old ways of having difficulty making their way down the road, which slows everybody down.
There's they say when it's dry for a long time, the roads accumulate a little bit of a layer of oil or whatever, and you need the rain to wash it away, so it's extra slick. So be careful out there. And anyway, Clint Kelly, of course, comes on every month, and we talk malpractice cases. In fact, we're going to talk about a case that you and I did as a story recently. But wanted just to ask you, you always bring items with you. First, just to remind our viewers, and we'll open up the phone lines. Malpractice attorney, that's what you specialize in. That's the only type of case you handle. Correct.
I'm board certified in medical malpractice. It means that I've had to go through a written exam, a verbal exam. I've had to have a certain amount of jury trials in medical malpractice, and I have to be approved by my peers, people who do this work for a living. So there are not a whole lot of us in Tennessee. And like doctors get board certification, now we do for this type of law. And a medical malpractice case is a major medical mistake that causes a major medical injury. The types of injuries that we handle: amputations, spinal cord injury, where patients are wheelchair bound, loss of life, loss of sight, any type of injury that can cause a complete breakdown of the ability to earn a living and or pay medical bills, because they have to be a significant enough injury, Nick, for the jury to want to compensate the patient.
Okay. All right. So that lays it out. And we can take phone calls, 737-7587. In fact, last time you were on, we got a few phone calls. I didn't know. Now, Clint's gotten cases off this show. I know you have, from people who have called in sometimes when we're there. There are a couple others where, we always say, and we'll put the number up before the end of the show to call his office, and you kind of vet it. Any word on that? I'm trying to remember what the nature of some of those calls were. I know they called in, and then you had them call your office later that day. Do you have anything new in the hopper right now?
Well, I do. I have to kind of walk a fine line, because these phone calls are confidential. I never speak about who I talk to. What I can say, though, is, there have been some people who've called into the show whose cases I have taken, and also whose cases are under investigation. I'll say that a good part of my work is investigating the claims, vetting them, to make sure they comply with the medical malpractice statute, the requirements that must be fulfilled before you file a lawsuit. And so that process can be timely, but it's important. And if the case does pass the vetting process, then I will file a lawsuit and go forward with it.
All right. Well, one case that we recently did a story on actually reminded me of that case we've talked about before over at Vanderbilt, where there is a nurse who's actually facing criminal charges. Now, the case that we're working on, that I did the story on, and I'll let you talk about it, is not criminal at this point. But I mean, some of the behavior alleged involving this nurse out of this facility, I think, could rise to the level of what we saw over at Vanderbilt, but it's not at this point. But still, there's a civil lawsuit involved.
It is. Just to remind everyone, the facts of the Vanderbilt case was a case in which a nurse was to have alleged to have given the wrong medication to a patient. She got the medications mixed up because the spelling of the medications, remember, Nick, they both started with V. But instead of the proper medication, this nurse gave a medication that basically paralyzed the patient, suffocated the patient, and the patient died right there, and there wasn't much to be done about it. At that point, the nurse, or there's no allegation, the nurse withheld the information. They acted on it.
But I know I'm still not clear exactly on why that's criminal, except she had to get into some portals and clear various safety procedures to get to this point. And this, by the way, is scheduled to go to trial. Both sides, they had a hearing recently, and they're going to trial right now on this.
You know, you and I could spend a show talking about where the line of criminal law and civil litigation intersect. But what I do know about that case is the allegation is she acted recklessly.
Okay.
That she recklessly disregarded a risk by overriding the safety mechanisms that were on this medication. She had to go in the computer and override some things in order to get this medicine, and I think that's what the state is claiming was reckless. The case you reported on that I'm involved in my opinion, is worse. Because in our case, this was a nurse who gave the wrong medication to a patient who has dementia.
And this is in an assisted living facility, right?
Yes, an assisted living facility. A patient with dementia who is unable to know or understand what medication she's taking. They take the medication, crush it up, and mix it with applesauce and feed it to the patient. And this is a fact now. We know this. This was admitted by the nurse and the nurse director. The nurse discovered this mix-up very shortly after she gave it to the patient, within minutes, presumably, because I believe she went to go give medication to the other patient and realized that
she mixed it up.
Rather than going to the family and to the nurse director and say, whoa, wait a minute, I've got the medications mixed up, and dealing with the situation right there, she concealed the mix-up.
Kind of hoping maybe that it would just go away.
We will know what's in her mind eventually in the lawsuit because she's been sued. But the bottom line for the viewers is she concealed that information for 3 days.
And that woman got very sick.
While the patient was sent to the hospital and transferred to the ICU. And while everyone is asking healthcare providers, what happened?
They couldn't figure it out.
No, they're running down rabbit
Why does she have these
trails.
symptoms? Yeah.
Exactly, trying to find out all these various reasons for this condition when the solution was right there with the person who gave her the medicine. And according to the facts as we understand them, this nurse got a crisis of conscience on day 3 and then decided to go ahead and report this to the nurse director. The nurse director calls the hospital. The hospital then begins remedial action, save the woman's life. But the woman's had a very, very long road to recovery from these medications. The point being, though, is this wasn't just a reckless act, which is what's being alleged in the Vanderbilt nurse. This act is intentional. This was
meaning after the fact. She didn't intentionally give her the wrong meds, but she intentionally concealed it after the fact is the allegation.
The intentional concealment is what's harm.
Right. That's where I think it could rise to a level of criminal. Again, that hasn't happened. We don't know if it's going to go that way. I don't know if the family is seeking that, but you're representing them civilly.
Correct.
Okay. Do you think that will go to trial?
I don't know if it's going to go to trial. You know, Nick, some cases should go to trial. Let me tell you why. It's not necessarily because of the money. They're going to pay a good bit of money in this case. The question is this of such public significance that the public deserves to know everything about what happened in this case so that people who have family members in these types of facilities are aware that this happens and can take some type of remedial action on their own, particularly checking on the people who are checking on your family.
Right.
I'm not sure to what extent family members get to know these nurses and develop a relationship that could someday save a life.
Right. No, I think the answer to your question is, does it rise to the level that should be, in some cases should in court? That's why we did the story. That's why I did the story, is because I have family in an assisted living facility, and my parents, and one, there's a question about this nurse and whether if these are proven, in court, that she should even be a nurse anymore. And two, you just want to be, as a family member, aware that these things question, right? That's one thing I've learned from you, is always, if something doesn't seem right, you ask a lot of questions. Questions going in, and if something seems odd, questions coming out.
But there was another crucial reason you did the story, and kudos to you and kudos to Channel 5 for doing it. We've talked a lot about how nurses can move from state to state, okay? So for example, she gets reported to the Department of Health here in Tennessee. They suspend her license or take it away, okay? Or they make the conditions of her further practice so onerous that no one wants to continue to employ her, and so she goes to Alabama. Now, how is anyone in Alabama going to know what she did here?
There's not some national database on, be it doctors or nurses, if they've been in trouble.
Correct. And there are some people, mine being included, who think this nurse should not be practicing. She needs to find something else to do. There's some conduct that, in my judgment, completely violates your right to be a nurse. But your story is a video record now of what happened.
Yeah, right.
And it can follow her from place to place to place, so that you don't have unwitting hospitals or clinics who look at this nurse's application and think, well, she's good as gold, and know nothing about what happened here. Because seriously, it's a real interesting question. I'd love to know what the public thinks. Do you think under these set of facts, this nurse should continue practicing? Would you want to be a patient of this nurse knowing what she did?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. I would like to know what the public thinks, but now we have a video record of it,
Yeah.
and that's what's important.
So people will know and they can make a choice for themselves. Listen, we got to take a break on that note. When we come back, that's just a bit, but just I want to throw out for you, as you heard Clint say earlier, we can answer any questions you may have about cases that you have. And the important thing to remember, if you have a situation that just has been on your mind and you're wondering this wasn't quite right, he's always reminding us there's a 1-year statute of limitations. You may have been done wrong. You may actually have had a very solid case, and if you wait more than a year, you're out of luck. So anyway, any questions that you may have yourself or for someone else, give us a call. The line's open, 737-7587. And I know Clint's got other stuff here we'll talk about as well. So we'll be back with more right after this.